See the votes like in real time.
Confusing. Which isn't really that difficult. All right, so Jen made the motion.
I did.
And Paul made the second. And it was about 8:45. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we're back. I don't think we had any motion. No, didn't we have one motion that you were going to share with us? I don't know. From the
For
executive.
the one that. Yeah.
Oh, well, so while we wait for that, we'll do the consent agenda. Does anyone have anything they want pulled? Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Do I have a second?
David and Chris.
Any discussion, questions, comments, concern? All in favor? Aye. Any against? Okay. So,
You ready for me to read it?
yeah, go ahead.
On the recommendation of the superintendent and schools, a motion to adopt the following resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves the following hourly rates for food service helpers in the schedule listed below, effective January 1st, 2022. Jamie Coca, $14.45. Jenny Sapara Jenkins, $15.02. Tracy Fontanez, $14.58. Joanne Schultz, $14.98, and Doris Severa, $14.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
We'll make that comment during the. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, comments?
Do we want to make a comment that the reasoning for the increase in line with?
Sure.
Okay.
And Cheryl, do you have, is this attached to the public?
I'll add it in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just add that note as well.
Right.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Any again? Okay. The Dutchess County Board nomination. I think the only one we have right now is from Gully Sanford.
Gully and the other person who's, I can't think of their name at the moment, sorry, but you have two people who are running who are already members.
Okay, and bottom line, you know, if there was 3 slots open, we could nominate 155 people. It doesn't really matter. It just says they have the right to run. So, and that's, when is that? That's a special meeting?
So you're gonna nominate them at the next board meeting, but then you'll do your vote at the special meeting in April.
Right, and we'll do that remote since it's like a 10-minute meeting,
Yeah.
right? Okay, all right, so that's what the Dutchess County Board nomination is about. Long-term financial plan.
It's his.
Yeah. Oh, there he is.
Here I am,
There you are.
one of the crowd here.
That's right.
You need
Okay.
our rights to present.
You should have access to that.
Okay, yes, I do. Look at that. Perfect. Well, thank you, everyone, for inviting me to your board meeting, talk about long-range financial planning. What I'm going to do is get this up on the screen and so you can see it a little better. And there we go. Everybody see that all right?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to kind of hide you folks so I can focus in on this. I'll be moving these bars from time to time because we've got data in different pages. But thank you for inviting me. Obviously, it's an important time to do some long-range planning. You're going to be building a budget very soon. Budget votes are coming up. Districts are getting hit with all kinds of things in terms of increased expenses across the entire state. State aid plans have just come out. So let's see if we can just kind of take a look at the long-range plan, at least where we are right now. And I wanted to highlight some of the things we're doing. So the first thing I want to go over, though, is the source of data. The data is actually data's already been registered with the SED State Education Department. The document called the ST3 we did 5 years prior, and then we're doing an estimate in terms of the end of this school year. This form is really important because what it does, it's a final accounting going to the State Education Department of your sources of revenue and your expenditures, and how your budget compared to actual expenditures and revenues. We do use the NYSED, New York State Education Department website for aid calculations, and there's a number of aid calculations there. We have taken a look at auditor reports and recommendations your district has received. We focused in on, your transportation system in terms of your bus contracts and so on, capital projects data. We are particularly interested in bonds, anticipation notes and bonds, capital reserves, debt service schedules, and all those because many of those, if not all of them, actually are in your tax cap calculation. We look at all their state aid calculations. I'm going to show you a summary of your state aid, at least based on what the governor has suggested for this year and next year. And keep in mind that state aid is always incomplete until the end of the school year, so we're going to have to make some assumptions. Your interim business administrator and treasurer have been very helpful with their time. Obviously, an interim business administrator is going to take some time to find out how everything works in there in the business office and in the budgets and so on, because obviously every budget is differently. Your treasurer has been a great source of information for us as well. And of course, this wouldn't normally be her job, would normally be your regular business administrator. So, and I know that the business office is down 2 people, so I really have to commend them for their work as far as we could get for tonight's presentation. We also had discussions with your superintendent of schools about basically what we do, some of the things I found. Take a look at some tax cap calculations and where tax caps could go. Look at some debt service fund and reserves. Reserves are very important. Your reserves right now are very robust, but I think over time, I think many districts are going to find their reserves under siege as federal funding, which we are now enjoying tremendously, the new federal grants, the CRISA grant and the ARPA grant, and those will be up in the September of 23 and September of 24. So we'll be back on our own. So reserves are going to be very important. We take a look at the reports from the Controller of the State of New York, Office of the Controller, to make sure we're not in violation of anything. We take a look at the use of funds, appropriated fund balances, unappropriated fund balances, and your reliance on them, not only over the last 5 years, but perhaps into the future as we take a look at particularly unappropriated fund balances are very important. And of course, we're taking a look at teachers' retirement system rates and employee retirement system rates. These tend to vacillate up and down. So we have to do some projections, but keep in mind that even if a rate goes down in one of these pension systems, when employees get raises, it could increase your costs. So something to keep in mind. So the first thing I want to show you here is, let's see if I can just move this down here until we get to that part. This is our analysis going back from the 16-17 year all the way through to 21 into the 22, which is your current year estimate. And what we've tried to do is take a look at your budget in a number of ways. The first thing we're trying to do is figure out what's called the expenditure variance. In other words, what's the difference between what was actually generally approved budget for the taxpayers approved, and then what was actually modified in that budget. And there's also carryover money for encumbrances and all types of other things that may come up. And then what we've also have is the actual expenditures is the next line down. So we're trying to compare them. So basically, if we go to 16-17, for instance, $28,440,000 change was actually budgeted in your expenditures, and you underspent that budget by $1.348 million. Now, this is important because what a lot of people do not understand is they simply think that you should only budget what you need. The problem is you don't know what you need exactly. And what I mean by that, and this is going to be the difficult job I think your interim business official and treasurer are facing now as they're learning everything about your budget and planning for the next year's budget. And they're working very hard on it. And that is that your budget must be big enough so that it can handle just about anything that comes its way. So I've seen some unbelievable things happen where all of a sudden costs have increased dramatically. I have a number of my clients calling from all over the state, and even my colleagues telling me they're having trouble getting bus drivers and bus monitors, and their contract busing is going way up, or the cost of their buses if they buy them is going up. They're having a hard time finding some principals in certain places, and they're having a hard time getting maintenance and custodial and cleaners and things like this. So what happens is there's unanticipated outcomes that occurred based on the economy and all kinds of things. Students with special need programs seem to be growing in terms of cost. Bless you. So the district really wants to make sure it has enough money in here. So you want money left over. Now, the interesting thing is probably due to COVID, I find this with most districts I'm working with, in the 2021 year, because you didn't have to use as much transportation, or you didn't have to clean the buildings because they weren't open as much because of people not being in school because of remote learning and so on. You didn't have as many substitutes, you didn't have as many sick days and all the rest of it. We found out that last year at almost every single one of my clients, the amount that they had unspent at the end of the last year was greater than any other year. But you'll notice that you were kind of starting to trend up here a little bit. Now, right now, I think we have a number that we're going to work with for this presentation, but I know it's going to take more study. You've got two new folks that are working on this in the business office, a little shorthanded, but I think they're going to keep working at this. And so far, I think we've actually found maybe about 1.4 million underspent. Now, if you notice, this is probably more in line with the 16-17 through 18-19 school years and not recent history. So I think that should be revisited because that's going to be an important number for you. The next thing we look at, of course, is the revenues. It's the same thing. So what we try and do is, remember, you're very constrained with revenues. You have a tax cap. There's also state aid, which is very prescriptive. And so you really want to make sure that you have enough revenues to operate the district and also enough cash on hand, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, you'll see in these out years here, basically revenues did not come in as budgeted. And of course, when I first came on board back here, we wanted to avoid that. We started turning that around. And last year, of course, here's a great example where revenues came in pretty hardly. So you ended up with a significant amount of revenues coming in that were unbudgeted. But this year, it looks like we're going to be short again. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, particularly in some of the revenues that you had counted on. State aid in particular has not been that robust, to be absolutely honest with you. The last state budget was not well received for at least Millbrook Central School District. So what we try and do is find out exactly how much. So we add these two numbers together, and we call this carryover, which would be kind of like improving fund balance or improving your unappropriated, unreserved fund balance. And you'll see we've had a banner year last year, but this year is really kind of weak compared to, except that we go way back. I thought we had kind of gotten past that, but right now I think this is going to take more research to find out if our revenues are going to come in a little bit better. Because state aid, I'm going to show you your state aid. Your state aid is usually, they publish it always in the paper when the governor comes out with a state aid proposal, and it's always wrong. And it's so hard to reconcile it because much of the state aid is determined by updates of records at the state education department, and they lack staff as well. So I think some of that is behind. Let me move this up here. So another way to kind of look at our data here is to look at, never mind what we're budgeting, how about, are we actually spending more than we're taking in? And the good news is you have not ever spent more than you're taking in, but this year it looks pretty close, especially compared to last year. There's that COVID year. So that's kind of serendipitous. That's kind of out of the blue. This would be more like it. I think that's where we're heading. But the idea is this looks pretty close, and this is a cautionary tale going forward. And what this is doing is you'll notice that your appropriated fund balance, in other words, the money that the district is promising to pay should all the expenses come absolutely true and all the revenues come absolutely true, then this is the money the district would be responsible for. And it has grown immensely into this year. So I think we've got to start taking a look at some plans to kind of level this out in the future. So as we look at state aid, this is one of the problem areas I think that the district is going to have long term. And this is foundation aid. And right now, the governor's proposal is to increase your foundation aid by $250,000 for the next 2 years. Now, this number will probably fluctuate by the time the legislature acts in April 1st, March 31st, April 1st, but it'll be somewhat similar to this. The dilemma is going to be is after that date, after this 23-24 school year, your school district will be considered what they call save harmless. And what that means is that the current foundation aid formula as it currently exists, when that formula is run, it comes out with the conclusion that Millbrook Central School District really should not get any more foundation aid. That's it. It's fully funded. But I do believe that the governor, for districts that are fully funded right now, has promised to give them 3% this coming year. So what I did is I increased this by about 3%, but you'll see there's a huge drop off here. So you're going to see a decrease in some of these revenues, I believe. Now, another thing that's going to happen in this school year, in the 23-24 school year, is that the state is going to lose a lot of the federal funds that are helping it pay you this $250,000. The state is going to be relying on two things. One is federal funds, which they're getting right now, which will end in the 23-24 year. And the other one is personal income tax growth. Well, based on the current political climate internationally as well as nationally, I'm not so sure we can count on personal income tax growth helping support the state into these out years. So I think we're going to probably see a state funding cliff. So I've actually built that in. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that in many cases, transportation, building aid, BOCES aid, the high cost aids for students with special needs, these aids really are really calculated best at the end of a school year. And that's because all the records are then in, everything is up to date. For instance, keep in mind the BOCES aid that you paid last year is being paid this year, but they're still calculating the actual relative amount of wealth factors that are in that formula. So I think many of these numbers here and in here will be unrealistic. At least you will probably have a better picture of them probably by April 1st. The other thing to consider is items like textbook aid, library software, and so on are really an enrollment number. As long as your enrollment stays stable, then these aids, although they're not large proportion of aids, they will stay fairly stable. And as you can see, I've kept them fairly stable with some increases in textbook aid. The other thing to keep in mind is the universal pre-kindergarten aid of $140,000. This aid is separated out when we add up all the aid, and I'll tell you why. Because this aid is not general fund money. This aid must go into something called the special aid fund. It's a distinct special fund, and it can be used to pay for a pre-kindergarten program. But the problem is this amount of aid, $140,400, is really hardly any money to run a universal pre-K program. So districts that do end up using a lot of their own funds to do it. So that's a distinct problem when we look at state aid. So I've actually summarized it, and I think there will be some growth, as you can see, but I think that growth will flatten out as we go forward. All right. So we put that into our scenarios. Now, one of the things that the district, I think, has got going for it, which I'm very proud to say that I helped work on this thing over the last couple of years, is building up reserves. And you can see that the business office has done a stellar job of building up reserves. Look at the increase in reserves. And this is great. And to me, it's in the right spot. We see this build up for retirement contributions, which is great because as employees get raises over time, even if that system stays stable in terms of its rate, the cost may go up, and you've got this great safety valve here. The other thing you've got is that the TRS contribution rate is going up. That is literally going up next year, as well as salaries. So there'll probably be an impact on your budget there going forward, but you have a safety valve should those rates really start to escalate. The reason those rates can escalate is because there's really two sources of pension funds. They are the stock market and the school districts. So what they do is they actually look at actuarial tables to figure out how much they're going to need in their reserves. And if the stock market does well, they fill up their reserves to start stock market proceeds. If the stock market does not do well, they simply increase their rates to school districts. And I'm really concerned about that. So you can see you've got a tremendous, great safety valve here. Very good planning on part of the district. You also have a capital reserve for new construction. This is excellent. This is a gift that keeps on giving. This is a wonderful thing for school districts to have, and you continue to build yours. And what's so good about a capital reserve for new construction is when you do a capital project, you use this money to offset the acquisition of debt. So let's just make up an example. Let's pretend that this $6,000, $6.99 million is $7 million. So let's just say you did a $15 million project. You would use $7 million here out of your reserves. And lo and behold, you would only have to borrow $8 million, but you could get aid on the entire $15 million. So you can get aid on using some of your own money. This is a fantastic thing for a district to have. Kudos to the district for actually developing this and building this. This is excellent.
Hey, Rick?
Yes.
So on the capital reserve for new construction, I think we just extended that to 10 million.
Yes.
Like the top-
This
top
right.
half.
This is the sum total so far of the deposit right now as it sits there. If you
Could
have
we-
excess fund balance at the end of this year, you could increase this. Yes.
I mean, should we be waiting, and hopefully I know the answer, but should we be waiting until we max that account out
No.
before we do a capital project, or?
No. If you should, there's a couple of factors you would consider. First of all, there's a couple things. First of all, there's a building condition survey that districts have to complete. I don't know if when yours is due. Some districts have already completed theirs. It was on a rotating schedule, but sooner or later, you do have one from 2015, and that should give you some clues. What I would consider right off the bat is, do you have capital project needs right now? What I'm concerned about is districts that are actually doing capital projects now are actually in pretty good shape because at least interest rates are low for any borrowing that they have to do. So that's important. But the thing is that districts that are in the middle of a capital project right now, they've had an advantage because, just before COVID hit, there was a lot of good pricing, a lot of work available, and so on. Problems we're having now is price escalations. And what I'm concerned about is the longer districts wait, the more things may cost. $1 million roof might cost 1.2, 1.3 million, another year or so. So I think there's where you would want to interface with an architect and construction manager the district uses to get some advice on where to go on that. The other thing I'd consider is, what kind of aid ceilings and aid ability do you have in the things you want to do? For instance, if you want to build a maintenance building, the problem there is it's not going to be aid eligible at all. And here, this capital reserve could actually help you pay for it and minimize or eliminate potentially any taxpayer impact. And then the last thing I'd look at is how big of a project you want to do. What we would do as your financial advisor, if you said, here's the scope, Rick, of the project we want to do, and here's what the estimated cost is from our architect construction manager, we would then examine it for aidability. And aidability is divided into two categories. Is the item actually aid eligible? For instance, a maintenance building, press boxes, they're not aid eligible. But work at the bus garage, almost all of it is, but you have contract busing. At your buildings, there's what they call aid ceiling. So each building has a maximum amount of aid that can be paid out within 5 years. We would compare what you want to do and its cost to previous construction projects to make sure you have these things aid eligible. Other things, for instance, buying equipment and things like this generally is not aid eligible. That's normally a general fund budget item. So we take all those things into consideration. So if you do have capital project needs, I would think we'd want to start examining this sooner than later. Remember, the $10 million that you put as your limit for your capital reserve means that The sum total of all the deposits over the life of the reserve cannot exceed 10 million, not counting interest accrued to the account. So in other words, here's an example. Let's just say, for instance, you started a $5 million reserve and you had $4 million in it already. Then you decide to take $1 million out to do a capital project. Could you put 2 in to get the 5? The answer is no, because then you would have put in 6 million. So you're limited to that amount as the sum total of deposits. But districts all the time use this as for multiple capital projects. You do not have to wait, not at all. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you, Rick.
You're welcome. So I think we've got a really nice plan here so far. Okay, let's see if I can get my mouse to work. Okay. Now we're going to go through a couple scenarios, and what I mean by scenarios is I'm not sure where the board will land and what it wants to do with taxes. We're not sure exactly where some of the state aid is going to fly in. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through 2 scenarios as examples. So right now, I hear from boards all the time, everybody thinks it's a 2% tax cap. Well, what I would encourage you to do is actually kind of demonstrate to the citizens where the tax cap comes from, because I have never found a tax cap calculation that came out exactly 2% in my entire career, unless you made it come out like 2%. So what happens here is we're using 1.9 across the board. So we're going to have a tax increase of 1.9 and 1.9 thereafter all through these years. Then we're going to have a state aid slight but stable increase. As you can see here, here's your state aid piece. And we're going to have a slight increase over time. I showed you your state aid, and I've got it divided into state aid, building aid, and transportation aid. So we're going to see some fluctuations there as well. And then variable transportation aid. The dilemma we have here is we don't know where contract busing is going to go for you. So if when you renew it, I think you'll be in for an interesting situation. I'm hearing from contracting companies that buses are costing more and the labor is costing more. So some of these contracts seem to be moving up pretty quickly. The building aid will follow your debt service schedule that was provided to us, and the federal aid will remain stable. Now, the federal aid in this case is Medicaid. So it's special aid, special needs aid here. It's very, very restricted. Now, for expenditures, we're going to follow your contractual obligations as we know them now and what we estimate them to be long term. We are not adding any notable change in staff patterns. In other words, we think you've got the staff you want to keep it. We don't know who's going to retire in year 25, 26, and we don't know if you're going to replace them or not, depending upon what job they have. So we're going to kind of stabilize that, as well as the ERS and TRS. Now, what we're going to do here is no increase in staff after the new federal grants. So what happens is right now, the plan is to use some of your federal grants to actually supplement your budget by increasing staff and program in certain areas by using this federal money. So it will not impact your general fund expenditures, your every year expenditures, which is exactly what one of the purposes of the grant is. So that's following the purpose of the grant. Key thing to understand, yes, go ahead.
All right, so that's talking about numbers of staff, like going from 15 to 17 people. But what about, one of the things we're realizing, on a regular basis is we don't pay as well as most districts. If we, somehow, and I don't know how we're going to do this, but if we somehow had to go, increase our base, is that part of federal grants, or that's just on us?
No, that's on you. So the federal grant, there's what they call there's a supplement and a supplant. Let me go through those so I can explain those. The supplement is what, everybody's doing a supplement of some sort with the new federal grant. And some people are also supplanting. So let's do supplement first. A supplement is where all of a sudden you say, you know what? We've got some mental health issues. Let's get a behavioral specialist. We need maybe another school psychologist. Let's get some social workers to help families and kids out in stress. And let's get a reading specialist in here to help out the kids who are struggling due to maybe learning loss or after school activities or whatever we're going to do. So the federal grant would pay for those people, and those people's cost would not be added to your budget. So that works great. The problem you've got is the two federal grants. One ends in September 30th, 2023. And the other ends September 30th, 2024. That means you won't be able to pay those people after that out of that grant. We have not made any consideration for bringing those people into your budget. In other words, keeping them. And most schools are saying to me, well, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to use them for those year and a half, 2 years, whatever we got them. And then, that'll be it for the program. The problem districts have is that it becomes sometimes a political issue because school districts rarely jettison anything they've ever had, if that makes any sense. In other words, once you get these people in there, who's going to want to have them go away? Because they probably are going to do a lot of good. So that's a political consideration you're going to have to consider. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't have the people. By all means, the purpose of the grant is to get this extra help. But I think the district is going to be hard pressed to pull those people into their budget. I think it'd be very expensive. Does that answer your question on that piece?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the other thing we could do is supplant. The supplanting idea would be is you could use some of the federal grant to actually pay people who are currently employed and take pressure off your budget. You keep the price in the budget, but you use it to build fund balance because of the exact same point you just brought up to me. And that is increased labor costs. Because what happens is I believe, even though you have terrific amount of reserves right now, I believe your labor costs are going to escalate fairly rapidly over this period of time. And you're going to be hard pressed to keep up with it, despite your reserves, if that makes any sense. Because I'm finding it all over the place. They can't hire people. People are stealing people from each other, in terms of districts. They can't hire people. They can't keep people. They don't retain people. And
We've heard rumors.
You've heard that rumor?
Yeah.
No, you got a smart administration, so I got to believe that you have already heard this. But the truth of it is that you're going to be in competition for labor, I believe, and benefits.
So if I understood what you said, we can basically pay for the increase with the federal grants, take that increase amount out of our budget and put it in reserves. And then after those grants run out, assuming they, don't get replaced by something, which they probably won't, then it would be on us. Is that right?
One point I want to clarify. You would pay them out of the federal grant, but you would keep the cost in the budget to create the fund balance. Let me give an example.
I got you.
So Rick's working for you, make it 60 grand, you pay him out of the grant. And then at the end of the year, you didn't pay Rick the 60 grand out of your budget. You can use that fund balance to pay Rick and anything else you need, future costs, labor cost increases over time after the grant. Does it make sense?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So the key thing here, though, is, well, it looks like, 1.99, everybody thinks it's 2%, and it isn't. Especially this year, there's more of a propensity for districts to go over 2% this year because one part of the equation is an increase of 2% on the budget, on the levy automatically, not counting everything else. So there's a real propensity sometimes to go over 2%. But it looks right now, looks like revenues are going to go about 9.7%. Now, that sounds like it's a big deal until I bring up the next page. Now, what I did here is I'm actually going to put the revenues on top from the previous page, but I'm looking at potentially your costs escalating at 17.8. So let's go through some of the details of where I'm coming up with it. First of all, you've got general support salaries. Now, let's make sure everybody understands what general support is. General support is central office administrators, the superintendent, the business office, and everybody that works in those offices is general support. And it's my understanding over the last year or so that you've elevated some people to, I don't know, like assistant superintendent style positions. And those have actually then increased the cost to the general support budget. So what has happened here, I divided up between salaries because now those will be contractually obligated, and other, which is everything but salaries. But also keep in mind in general support salaries is every cleaner, maintenance person, clean custodian and things like that are all in general support salaries. So there's been a big bump and you can see this bump in general support salaries. Now, instructional salaries, really the people from principals and everybody else that works with kids. And I mean the teachers, the guidance counselors, teacher assistants, teacher aides, the school nurse, right? School psychologist, all special ed teachers, everything, all those people are in instructional salaries. And again, look at the bump. We got a bump here. And what we have is others, everything but. The biggest cost in other, in many cases, is either equipment, BOCES costs. It could be, when I say equipment and BOCES costs, could be purchase of computers through BOCES, things like this. But it also includes special ed programs that you may be buying through BOCES. So this you'll notice it's not moving very far, but it's moving. Transportation, we got a person really in charge of transportation, but here's basically your contract for transportation. We've kept it on a kind of a easy scale up, but I don't know where it's going to go. So this is probably a conservative figure, and these are probably a little more robust, if that makes any sense to you, because these are real people numbers. I mean, labor, I think, is really going to be a problem going forward for all districts, not just yours. Then what happens is you got to keep in mind, connected to all these salaries are employee benefits, retirement, Social Security, workers' comp, health, and so on. And you know, health insurance is a big number here in this budget. You'll see that retirement is a big number. Social Security is a function of salaries. So all these numbers are moving along with the salary numbers. Then you have debt service. And what you'll have here is your debt service schedule. So far, it's kind of on a general incline down here based on your last projects, the sum total of all the projects you're still paying for. Now, the good thing here on this is RAN TAN. Look at all the zeros. That's perfect. A RAN or a TAN, revenue anticipation note, tax anticipation note. Somebody says, well, why do you show it? It's all zeros. I'm showing it because it's a good thing. You want all zeros in here. In other words, you have no expenses for borrowing money to keep your cash flow going. So far, so good. And then you have some interfund transfers for capital outlay and school lunch program. The school lunch programs are struggling mightily all over the state, and it's a problem. But every time you send money to the school lunch program, remember, you're taking money out of the general fund. So you got to keep that in mind. But it's a tough nut to crack. Keeping school lunch programs in the red, or excuse me, in the black is very difficult in New York State. All right, and then what we've got here is your total expenses. So you notice there's a difference between your total expenses and your total revenues. And that's really what's going to be called the appropriated fund balance. So let me bring some other items in. Now you remember, we're talking about the carryover money or the money unspent in the budget. Remember, it looks like we're short almost 200,000 in revenue, so which means really it's putting pressure on the expense side of the budget. So what that means is instead of us carrying over 1.4, 2 million, $3 million, we might be carrying over 1.31. Now this is a preliminary number, and I think we have to give deference here. You have an interim business official and a treasurer who normally wouldn't do this kind of work. You have two people short in a business, and they're trying to figure out how much money you're going to end up with, because Rick Timms asked them, how much money are you going to end up with June 30th? Not now, June 30th. And we're trying desperately to figure out, and this will probably have to be revisited. But if you supplant money, this number could go up. In other words, you could be budgeting these numbers and paying people out of, we'll say, the federal funds, and you could actually boost up these numbers. I've got them flat as if you didn't, but that's how it is. And you've also, as I noted when I showed you the reserves, you've increased your reserves. So really, we've got a good reserve. This number I wish was a lot higher. And I know that the interim business official and treasurer will be going through all the accounts and everything they can find. My suggestion, and I mentioned this to the superintendent, is at this point, because this is so hard to track, because I think we got an unstable political environment in terms of, pension systems, labor costs, and everything else. I advise all my client boards right now, it is February. If you didn't buy it by now, don't buy it. You didn't need it. So I would actually kind of cut off expenses at this point, unless they're what I call mission critical. You need them for the kids, for the program, you got to do it. But if they're not, it would be a nice to have. I'd actually skip it until we get a bigger number down here. I mean, a bigger number. So this is how that works. Now, so the next thing we got to take a look at is this mess of numbers down here. And let me call your attention to the bottom number first. This bottom number is simply the difference between your expenses and your revenues. And this year, here was the voter approved budget right here, 31,714,951. And you had pledged $1.138349 million. Should you need it, take it out of reserves, cash on hand, whatever you had, in order to balance the budget, should you spend out the entire bunch of expenditures. Well, it appears that you're not going to spend out, so you really won't need use all that money, so you're going to live to fight another day. But the dilemma comes as we go forward. Notice the amount, because the difference between the revenues and expenditures starts to move away from each other. Picture them as two lines coming apart instead of getting closer together. So what happens here is, let me use this one as an example. This $2.1 million will then have to be appropriated when you do your budget in May, held sacred by the district and not spent for anything. All right. And what's going to happen here is then you're going to build up your unassigned fund balance, which is right here, which is the 4% limit. If I get my mouse working here, you're going to build this up. And then what's going to happen is you hypothetically with either tap, I'm going to tap your reserves to keep your cash on hand, your cash flow high. And I'll do it every time. So this goes up bigger. Now look what happens here. This number is bigger than that number. So the number you need to save the district is bigger than the amount of money you're carrying over. So therefore, you're going to tap potentially some reserves long-term. This 2.5 million that you need to balance the 23-24 budget is bigger than a 1.3 you're bringing over. So you're going to have to tap more reserves. So if this trajectory were to keep going, you would lose one heck of a lot of reserves in a short period of time. And that's because the carryover money is not enough. In other words, it's barely enough to keep you afloat. Remember, you needed 1.138, carrying over 1.231. So what's going to happen is, as you need more money to balance this budget. Now, remember our scenarios. I got a 1.99% increase in all these taxes, and I've got state aid, and I told you how state aid is going to wane there in the final 3 years. That's a problem for you. So to me, what we'd want to do is start finding a way to slow down the rate of increase of these costs. Does that make sense? Now, this doesn't mean we're going to go broke. It doesn't mean you are in excellent shape right now. What we want to do is make sure this number gets bigger by the end of the year and find ways to build up these numbers over time. I'm going to give you an example. So let me give you an example. So in this scenario, let me get this down here. I've got a tax increase of 2.97, which I think is going to be your tax cap this year, if I remember right during our conversation. And then what I just did is I said, let's just say it's 2.9 this year, but it keeps going down a little bit each year until it gets down to 2%. Now, if we could keep it up there, and of course, no board, no superintendent, no business official, no treasurer wants to raise taxes needlessly. But the thing is, if your state aid starts to wane, you're going to be more dependent on the tax base than you will be on state aid. If you'll notice, look at the size of your tax base payment compared to your state aid payments, and you can see it's significant. So you're heavily tax reliant. So if you'll notice now, I boosted up the overall revenues over time. Now I'm also going to do something else. Everything else in here stays the same, except I'm going to supplant to maintain staff. I'm going to supplant some of the staff. In other words, I'm not going to use all of my federal money for supplementing. I'm going to use some of it to supplant my budget. So I'm going to keep the number in a budget, but I'm going to pay for it out of the federal grant to increase my fund balance. So what I'm going to do here is move the taxes. Like, I know this is going to be your cap. Undesirables it may be, that's your cap. By the way, if you go below the cap, you will never recover that money, and you're going to need all the money you can get, I think. So the big thing here is we have increased revenues largely due to the tax increase. So now, let me move this down. Now what we've got to do is we've got to compare these total revenues to these total expenses again. but we're still short, 11.4 to 17.8, but we're gonna make an improvement. I'll show you how. Notice I increased this number by 200,000 over these 2 years. Now, I don't know if you're able to supplant by 200,000. That actually has to be studied. All right, your administrative team and the business office is going to have to study the degree to which this can be done. That if you could supplant $200,000 within each of these 2 years while you got the grant, you would then build up the fund balance by $200,000. So your carryover money would increase by 200,000, and then it would go right back to where it was. Now, I'm hopeful that if we can find a more robust number here, we'll end up with more robust numbers there. So I think it would be a better situation. But now notice what happens. Now this thing is not going up as fast. In other words, the unappropriated unreserved fund balance is not going up as fast. We're not moving as much money over for appropriated fund balance. And you'll notice you are not depleting the reserves as fast. So to me, it's like a combination of things. I think you have to do some supplementing because I think you owe it to the kids in the community to do it. I think you owe to do some supplanting because you owe it to the kids in the community to do it, so you can build up fund balance. The business department, I'm sure, is going to be rifling through every code they can find to find out any way we can save some more money by the end of the year, which would bring this number up, these numbers down, and then it would tap less reserves. So this is kind of a cautionary tale. We don't know where we're going to go. When we start extrapolating into 24, 25, 26, 27, it becomes very, very difficult. But the idea is we can see that generally speaking, unless we start supplanting some money and trying to save expenditures and get those taxes where they're supposed to be in terms of the tax cap, we could have some difficulties long term. So what I've done here is simply to take the two scenarios. Scenario one, no increase in staff after the new grants. In other words, we're going to supplant the whole thing. And then when that money's gone, those people are gone, which I think is going to be a tough political nut to swallow. And I think it's going to drain your reserves. Now, I think you're going to have more carryover money, so I don't think it's going to drain them this bad, but that's the only number I have to work with right now. However, I think if you supplant, things could look a lot rosier. You can see the difference with the supplanting. So the supplanting will work, but I think you have to have a multi-pronged approach. I think you've also got to decrease the rate of increase in terms of some of these expenses. So you have to be very, very careful on the expense side. And I think we've got to budget state aid more accurately. To me, I always suggest school districts underestimate their state aid. It's always wrong. It is always wrong. The controller has allowed districts that if they have evidence that the state aid figures provided in the final analysis are incorrect, they can substitute them for evidence-based state aid numbers. And I think the district ought to be doing that. The state aid is too important here. So what I've done is some recommendations here. I think we got to re-examine the 21-22 budget, the current budget for sustainability and other issues. We got to look for more carryover and reallocations here. We got to find ways that we're going to underspend this budget even more than that $1.2 million. And the more, the better. The budget process, we've got to keep in mind, we're extrapolating cost estimates. So when you do your labor context and so on, these are going to have impacts on your long-range plans. So to me, what you got to do is, while you're trying to maintain a cash flow to keep a good quality program, you got to take a look at cost reductions, but obviously you start with those away from students first to mitigate the escalation of expenses. Your expenses are going to escalate. Every school districts are, but what you want to do is decrease the rate of increase of the escalation of the expenses. So you may have to reevaluate purchases and staff needs. Now, I've suggested all districts start looking at long-range plans for equipment replacements, whether it's the snow plow or school vehicles, or it's the computers, laptops, iPads, or whatever the heck it is. I think we're going to start taking a look at long-term equipment needs. But I also think you have to look at the possibility of attrition and breakage. Now, attrition would be perfect in the sense that if Rick was working for you and Rick retires or leaves the district for some reason, the old question used to be all the time, who are we going to get to replace Rick? The new question should be, do we need to replace Rick? Maybe we need something else that other than what Rick did, or we don't need Rick part-time, a new Rick part-time, or something like that. So I think you got to find ways to start saving some money. Monitor long-term expenditures, and don't forget, especially to the financial plan, because you have limitations on revenues. Your state aid is limited, your building aid is limited, your trans aid is limited, your extra costs for students with special needs, limited. Every state source of revenue to you is highly limited to your school district. You're heavily reliant on taxes. And if we want to moderate the taxes, we got to moderate the expenditure. Now, beware of a possible fiscal cliff, state fiscal cliff in 24-25. As I said, you're relying on two things: federal funds, that are going to be gone by then, and personal income tax growth factor, which, based on what's happening in the last month or 2 months, I think is going to be problematic for them in this state. 2, reevaluate reserve and fund balance accounts for sustainability. So you want to monitor that ERS and TRS reserves. Now, if we can build fund balance back up, we want to keep maintaining that. The problem I'm worried about is losing the fund balance. You got to take a look at those capital reserves. As you had asked about the capital construction, you got to take a look at your building integrity and find out how that can be leveraged to eliminate a tax impact. You really want to keep the tax impact level, and you want to keep the impact on your budget level. So the use of capital reserves is critical here. But there are other things. What about technology? What about equipment? What about vehicles? I don't know of any long-range plan for the district at this point, but it certainly ought to be looked at so it can be included in this plan. Then, of course, the new federal grants are going to be problematic. In one way, they're going to go away. The good thing is that they're here now, and you can supplement and supplant. But remember, they're going to be gone in 24, 25, 25, 26 in the scenario I just gave you. And therefore, you're going to be on your own. And then state aid, your foundation aid will be increased over 10% until safe harmless status, which means you're going to get somewhere in the neighborhood of a 10% increase in foundation aid for the next 2 years. And then you might only be getting 2.5%, 3%, but your expense-driven aids will continue. But really, you don't get reimbursed very much. And you got to monitor the tax gap. You have a growing use of appropriated fund balance. And the thing you want to avoid is the need for a supermajority. I think if you look back, districts do not follow the tax gap. They lose significant funds of money, and they lose it over and over. Let me give you an example. So I'm working with a number of districts, and they say, well, we're thinking of going below the cap. Is there any implications? I said, sure. Once you do not collect that money, you'll never collect the money annually forever. Let me give you an example. I'll make a colloquial example very easy. Let's just say I was going to pay each one of you $100 a day for the next 5 days. But at the end of the first day, we'll say it's a Monday, I come to you and I say, you know, I've reconsidered this. I actually don't want to pay you $100. I'm going to pay you $90. Well, now you are short $10. The next day comes and I say, you know what? I'm going to give you what I gave you last time, 90. You're not short 10 again. You're short 20 in total. By the end of the week, you will be short $50. And that's the way the tax cap works. If you do not collect $50,000, $100,000, $25,000 every year, you don't collect that amount. And to make it worse, the next year, you actually base your tax cap on your reduced levy. So it makes it worse. So please keep in mind the tax cap. So are there any questions I can answer for you?
Yeah, I mean, Rick, one of the reasons that we were harping on this long-term financial plans since the last one you did for us was to be able to like look at when we want to do something, we need to hire 4 people. We need to, you know, have 2 new people over here. What is that longer term financial plan, including, you know, the maintenance vehicles and the stuff that we have to do on a regular basis? Is this plan now in a, I'll call it a living document where we could do, well, what if we increase this by $20,000?
Matter of fact, what we're going to do is this is a giant spreadsheet with multiple tabs, if you're familiar with it, all linked together with all the formulas unprotected. That makes sense? So that you can say, well, what happens if I don't know, we gave all these people a raise of this percent instead of that percent? You could run multiple scenarios generally. Now, this spreadsheet though, the budgeted numbers that are in there are built to protect fund balance, even though it starts taking fund balance. For instance, in the formula, for instance, I would ask, I asked the district, how much you're going to pay all the people in general support this year? And let's just say they said X amount of dollars, okay? And I said, well, how much of a raise you're going to give them? And they say 2%. So in the scenario, I give X amount of dollars, a 2% raise into next year, okay? Hold it. Then what I do is I find out what was the difference between how much you were going to pay them and how much you budgeted to pay them. That's your fund balance. Then I add that back in to protect it. Does that make sense? So one of the big problems that I find with districts that, especially you have a seasoned interim business official, so I wouldn't expect this to happen at all. But with a new business official, sometimes what they do is they say, well, we did what you said, Rick, we cut our budget. I said, well, what'd you cut? Well, the general support salaries were supposed to be $1 million, and we made it 900,000. Then I say, well, who did you cut? And they go, well, nobody. We just cut the amount. Now you're cutting the fund balance out that helps you live to fight another day. In other words, you got to cut an expense. Does that make sense? So you can do this with this spreadsheet. And if you need additional assistance, obviously I'm here to help, because I'm doing like a zillion of these things and I've been doing them for a long, long time. But the key thing is like I said, the out years are always toughest, but at least you get a good blush as where the trend's going. You even have the ability, say for instance, Rick, Sally, Martha, and Beverly decide to retire and you do not replace them. You can go right into the cell and take their salaries out if you want. Okay,
Yeah, we need
the
to,
spreadsheet is going to be given to the district, and if you want, I'll help them with it. You know it.
yeah, we definitely need to make this an integral part of our business instead of guessing at, hey, we're going to hire this person at a something, or we're going to approve a contract increase of this. We need to know where that's going to put us 5 years from now, 3 years from now.
I think you're right. You're right. Because when we were doing the analysis, for instance, in general support and also in instruction, we ended up spending more than we budgeted for salaries. At least it looks that way at this point. And I said, well, how'd that happen? Well, we did this, we did that, we did this, we did that. So, because it's already done, my reaction is, oh, okay. It's not how much I can do about it now. Information I could have used earlier. But the key thing is that it can be used for that type of thing. Remember, some parts of it are going to be blunt force. We're taking a percentage against everybody's salary to come up with retirement, but it's not the end of the world. We could figure that out. But the truth of it is the big ticket items, if you'll notice, they're really salaries and, health insurance and things like this. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I'm assuming it's broken down. So if we wanted, the director of facilities go in and say, I've been budgeting $100,000 a year for exhaust fans or something, or even we've got a capital project that's going to do something, put a new thing in, that thing needs this amount of maintenance. I'm assuming that with the right help, we could get all that rolled into ours,
Yes, I think
as long as it makes a difference.
some of it's going to have to be done by your business office, obviously. I'm not going to try and figure out how many fans you got and all the rest of this, because you can. But the key thing is, let's just talk about that capital project for a second, because I think that's a great point. What I always find is there things I can do in a capital project? Now, the maintenance people aren't going to replace the roof. But you know what? If they keep replacing 16 exhaust fans a year because they're dying on us and they're costing $20,000, let's get that done during the next capital project to take the weight off the budget.
Yeah.
So that's the
That
type
makes
of
sense.
thing, we're talking project scope. When we're working on capital projects, I'm usually right in there with the architect and the CM saying, what's the project scope? And I start asking everybody why we're doing this, why we're doing that, why aren't we doing this, why aren't we doing that? Because what I'm trying to do is make our actual financial plan leaner, meaner, better to benefit the district. I mean, seriously, there's some things that I gotta believe that is costing you money, either in energy or something that could be done in a capital project that could take some weight off the budget, even if you left the money in the budget to build fund balance to take the weight off the budget.
I mean, we've been pushing, well, since you did the first one.
Yeah, I've been waiting, so nobody said anything until somebody suddenly contacted me. I thought, okay,
Well, we looked at your numbers and you didn't predict COVID, so we thought
I
maybe.
did not. No, I know, but everybody slowed down. There was nothing you could do
Yeah.
about it. What were you supposed to do, right?
No, but I mean, the whole point was for us to turn this thing into, you know, a real part of our day-to-day, not day-to-day, but month-to-month operation. So when we're looking at a budget, do we know, like right up front, what we can and can't increase and spend, or where we can we identify places where we think we could save?
Well, here's what I suggest. You know, when I was a superintendent, and I was a district superintendent, and I was a principal and all the rest of it. It's funny because once I became a superintendent, I changed the way all budgeting was done in every district I was ever a superintendent. Because what we would do is we would actually build a budget, and that was the budget. In other words, if maintenance said they wanted to buy 5 fans it was. If we accepted that they could get 5 fans, not 6 fans, not 8 fans, not if we had money left over, let's buy more fans. Okay. And so by around December 1, I used to send out a letter every place it was. Hey, thanks everybody for doing a great job in the budgeting this year. We're done buying anything. Because if you haven't got it by now, you didn't want it bad enough, but you could only buy what you were was budgeted. So seriously, I had building budgets. Buildings had their budget. I don't want to hear, well, I need money for more paper. But what'd your budget say?
Yeah.
So to me, it's kind of like, hello, because what happens is there's got to be what I call budget discipline. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And I think it behooves, you know, the O&M's guys got to know exactly everything we're going to need. We have to have a long range plan. Like I said, vehicles, equipment, technology. I think I mentioned during one of our conversations while we were building this, I said, you know, what, you know, schools, I always ask, what did you use your smart schools money for? Well, some schools, you know, Wi-Fi drops, they used it for, you know, servers and things like this, right? Other schools did it for that, but they also bought like 350 laptops, 42,000 million iPads. Nothing wrong with that. But the problem is those pieces of equipment have a lifespan. So now I say to them, okay, now that you spend all that money, what are they going to be worth in 5 years? They get broken, they get lost, the operating systems don't work, they have different applications, won't work on those machines anymore. What's the plan to replace the machines? And in many cases, I get this blank stare like, I don't know, Eddie, you know, does anybody know what was the plan on that? It could be part of the technology plan. Yep. So to me, it's the same thing. Snowplow. You know what I mean? Food trucks and school districts that, you know, have all the breakfast and lunch and run their food all over the place. I mean, so the school van, whatever the heck it is, you know, the lifts to get up and down the gym. You start thinking of all the equipment. I used to watch maintenance guys spend every day in a 48-inch, you know, Briggs and Stratton lawnmower doing like, I don't know, 10 acres of lawn all summer long. Nothing else got done. So I saved up my money in a capital expense for operations and maintenance, and I bought a 19-gang lawnmower one guy used.
There you go. You still got that lawnmower?
No, that was really a long time ago.
So any folks have any questions for Rick? I mean, I really want to see us try to keep this as an ongoing, you know, at least once a year to revisit this, but
sure,
maybe we can do a quarterly. I don't know. I'll leave that up to Kevin and his team as to, you know, when we should do it, but we really need to take a look at this stuff and look at the out years and before we get there and find out we're in trouble, see if we can't fix it earlier.
I think one of the things you got to keep in mind is that sometimes despite the district's best efforts, it can't control some things, right? New regulations. I mean, right now we've got so many regulations, we're swimming in them, costs, that aren't your fault. You know what I'm getting at? It's like you haven't done anything wrong. I think you mentioned sometimes we don't always pay the highest. Well, it sounds like you've tried to be austere as best you can, but what happens is everybody's like, I'm right over top of you and you're going to get rolled over there. And, the federal grants come and go and everybody was all excited to look at all the money and everybody was quick wanting to spend it. But to me, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. What are our possibilities here? So I serve at the ready. If you need anything, I'm always here. Had a great conversation with Laura. She's been wonderful, understanding what I'm trying to accomplish and so on, and some of the limitations we've got. You have a changing of the guard immensely in the business office. So I think you got to cut them some slack over there as they try and figure things out. This stuff is important, but they really, my impression is they want to do a great job.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
Just a big thanks, Rick. Rick, thank you.
Oh, sure,
For
Paul, no
everything.
sweat.
And I'll tell you the updates, 5 or 6 years ago, whenever we saw you last, but even making things current, talking about pricing and things like that. And then that reserve fund with the capital projects and the different types of capital projects. Not everybody thinks about like just building and doing physical things. The equipment opens up a whole nother avenue. So thank you for mentioning that. I think it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I've got some districts, we've actually started 3 or 4 capital reserves. So, I mean, depending upon what they're doing and where they're at, everybody's got a little different plan. And, you should you should have a regular reserve plan. It should be revisited every year and what we're going to use it for and things like that. There's a lot of work we can continue to do. And, I'm ready when you guys are. So.
Thanks.
Very good.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Rick.
Rick.
All right, you guys take care. Be well.
I will see you.
Night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. I wonder if we should have a working session, not probably not for the board unless there's some folks that are interested, but to have everyone sit down with Rick and just look at what we could do with that, planning out maintenance stuff, planning out, helping with, Kevin did a great job with the food services stuff. Can we roll that into this? I don't know. To me, it would be so much better if we had an outlook of, hey, if I do this now, this is what's going to happen in 5 years, 3 years. 5 years may not be the most accurate, but 3 years, we should be able to be pretty close. So, all right, anyway. Board president, vice president report. The only thing I have is 6 o'clock on March 10th is our retreat. Cheryl said she was going to cook brajol and
Yeah, I'm all ready.
we'll 6 o'clock. Howard, do you have anything?
No, I don't.
All right, superintendent's report.
Yep, good evening, everybody. My report is there, so if you have any questions, let me know. A few highlights, we had the middle school STEAM fair. So I don't know if I'm taking a little bit of your energy, Steve, but I was there and it was wonderful. So kudos to Nicole Barnes, the teacher, and our young scientists. They had wonderful projects and they were able to speak about them in such an articulate manner because they owned their project. They did their project. So it was great. Just a reminder that the High School National Honor Society ceremony is February 23rd at 6:30. And unfortunately, due to snow, our junior all county was canceled this year. But they are going to come to a board meeting March 22nd, and we're going to give out certificates, and they're also going to have perform for us. So it'd be nice to see students here at a board meeting. And then 2 items that are not on my report were the esports that we wanted to just revisit. I know you were asking about bus costs, Perry, and so Caroline did some research for you. And Karen at First Student said it would be $56.54 per hour, regardless of the size of the bus. Assuming practice is 2 hours and a total trip is less than 4 hours, it would be $226.16. And then the match is about 3 hours long.
Okay.
And that would be about $282.70 per match. So the total is approximately $5,148.60. And then the proposed stipend would be $2,000, which is comparable to other schools. I know Arlington is around $2,000. So
Okay.
just want to make sure that those numbers are good because we'd really like to just move on it.
Well, and then after the first, I guess, they play seasons or years, or how's that go?
It's 10 weeks. It's
So
approximately 10 weeks.
after that first session, we really should have feedback come to the board about, was it successful? Did our kids
Yeah.
have fun? Did it, all that good stuff.
And then just the other piece we received from our attorney regarding masks, because there was some guidance we should have been receiving or changes. So Julie wrote, we just received confirmation that the emergency regulation that extends the mask in the schools for another 60 days was filed as of today with the Department of State. Thus, the mask rule remains intact for now, at least. The next date to watch will be in early March, based upon both the appellate division deciding the Nassau case, coupled with Governor Hochul's announcement anticipated on or around March 4th. Since our current reopening plan requires masks, there should be discussion sooner than later about whether or not to continue the masks if the state makes them optional. And then she says, if consensus of the board is to make masks optional, if the state makes them optional, then they should vote to amend the reopening plan to make masking requirements considered with state requirements. It's a future conversation.
When was that date again?
March 4th.
Yes.
When does our reopening plan go in? Or this is like,
It's a current, it's,
backwards.
yeah, it's a reopening plan that exists. It
Mhm.
still needs to be updated, and Julie and I have been discussing it, but right now in the reopening plan, it says there are masks required. So
Okay.
if the board decided to make them optional, if the state made them optional and the board aligned itself with the state, then we would want to change our reopening plan,
So we don't meet again before March 4th.
right?
right, the 8th.
But she's gonna send a letter out on the 4th. That doesn't mean, well, it doesn't even mean it'll say anything.
An announcement anticipated on or around March.
Because it will be on the 4th.
Well, we have two choices. We could vote on something now contingent on the governor. Or we could, what's the first meeting in March?
The 8th.
The
Yeah.
8th. And the 4th is what day of the week?
Right.
Friday. So, it would be Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then Tuesday, we would vote on it. So I think, I don't know how everybody else feels.
I'm fine.
You guys good with that, Chris, Paul?
Yep, sounds good. Thanks, Per.
Comes out on a Friday and says that it's optional,
Which it can be on.
can be optional. We still are gonna have the kids come to, even if.
Yeah, Monday and Tuesday.
Monday and
they-
Tuesday, and then we can change,
Is everybody not okay with making a contingent vote now? Or, I'm okay waiting if everybody's not ready, if they want to think it over, but.
Now,
I'm okay either way.
I'm fine either way.
either way.
Give parent, if it actually went that way, you give parents, because you know what's gonna happen?
Yeah, I know.
She's gonna say something and then we're gonna send the kids to school if that's how it went for 2 days and parents are,
No, you're right.
why should they wait those 2
You're right.
days?
Mhm.
Why don't we,
So do I have a,
contingent? It's all contingent.
Right.
so do I have a motion to augment our opening plan contingent on the governor announcing that the masks are optional, to update our plans is to make masks optional. Close enough?
Yep, you're good.
Yeah, contingent that the governor returns the power to the local school boards to make the decision.
Yeah, all right. So we good with that?
The motion.
Hello, do I have a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any against? Okay, so if she comes out on the 5th or 4th or whatever that was and says it can be optional, then be optional.
Yeah, that will help administration, that will help our
Mhm.
families,
Yep.
our kids.
Yes.
So appreciate that.
Especially the kids.
All right,
That's all I have. Those
Okay.
things. Unless you have any questions about my report.
Caroline,
Yeah, so my report is very brief. I just wanted to make the board aware. Due to shortages in the county with CPSC evaluators and providers, some of the timelines for our evaluations have been very challenging. And even when students are being classified as students with disabilities qualifying for CPSC or preschool services, we are unable to find service providers. So we ultimately are responsible, even though this work all goes through the county and the county list of providers. Currently, it's putting us in a very bad spot as a district because it is ultimately our responsibility to evaluate these students and to provide those services if they qualify as a student with a disability. So at this point, on advice of counsel, I'm going to be doing two things. One, we're going to have to post for a special ed itinerant teacher to meet the needs of students who have already been identified. We're also going to have to be posting for additional evaluations for some of our own employees to do. And then I will be bringing forth, as soon as I receive it, a contract from the county with the reimbursement rates. So the reimbursement rates are not what it's going to cost us, but it will bring some revenue back into the district while avoiding the potential liability of impartial hearings and due process complaints for students not getting their services or evaluations in a timely fashion. That could lead to like compensatory education and services that we would have to provide essentially. So this will be stepwise. We had to provide insurance information to the county to show that our providers have the insurance that we need to have in order to do this. And then we will be posting for it, and then I will be bringing the contract. One way or another, we're on the hook for it. The contract will just let us know how much we can potentially get.
what do you need from us, Caroline? Is that something we have to motion on, or is that just signatures?
The contract will be, and it's nothing right now. We have to, we have to do this internally with our people. So I did build the cost of the additional evaluations into one of the grants. So it shouldn't actually be any cost to the taxpayer. But the one thing that we'll be looking at is the reimbursement rates for the county. So I don't have that information yet.
But you can move forward with this without a
The only
board
thing we
meeting.
would wait for is then the reimbursement contract. So
Okay.
that's forthcoming.
So Caroline, what you're saying is things will be done in a timely manner. It just will be different than in the past.
Yes.
Yes.
It's
Okay.
going to be very taxing on our people,
Unfortunately.
but it has to be done.
Yeah, for the good of the student, it has to be done. Correct.
All right. That's it? Gotta learn how to stretch.
Well, her reports are typically the first person.
All right, so Elliot, anything?
Just a couple touch points on the two big physical plant issues we had over the last couple of weeks. So our water issue at Millbrook High School, I'm glad to say is resolved from a physical structural perspective. We are back in the rooms that were affected by the water damage.
Good.
So all rooms are back in service. All repairs were done. Our contractor, with the board support, NICER support, we were able to take 6 days of work and get it done in roughly 3 days between the Saturday, Sunday, and Monday of Superintendent's Conference Day, the 14th. So by the 15th, we were back in service. We are still working on a plan for replacement of damaged materials. So the tech department staff is going through and over the next couple of days, going to be testing all the equipment that was affected by water to see what level of function it is. If it's fully functional, we can put it back in service, and we're just going to track it, make sure it doesn't die 2 weeks from now, or some sort of shortened lifespan because of the issue.
Was that stuff covered by insurance?
So it will be. We have everything sequestered and ready for testing. Both the instructional supplies from the teacher. Ms. Craig has been very helpful with identifying materials and then consolidating her things and giving us cost estimates for replacement. My staff is doing the same thing with all the technology materials. I've been in touch with the adjuster. He's been on site twice. He's coming back in another week or so to just assess what we've quantified out in terms of damage. I'll be meeting with Laura and Kevin to find money. There's a deductible for the insurance that was identified at approximately $25,000. Plus, we're going to have to at least initially foot the bill for the replacement of materials while we await reimbursement. So it's just a little strategic money movement that has to happen to get there. We're already sending any static stock we had to the building to get them up and running so that we're not crippling instruction to the best that we can. So the staff has been great. Mr. Sype has been incredibly flexible and supportive. Our facilities team just responded so quickly. So I can't thank everybody involved for how careful and tactful and flexible they were in getting this work done. The other big issue we had Elm Drive rooms 18 and 19 down in the pre-K section. We had some frozen pipes happening in the same time frame as what happened at the high school. Unrelated conditions, but just so happened to be problems happening in the same week. Those busted pipes have been rerun on the inside of the building. So for anybody that doesn't remember my last report, we had the rooms at the very end of the hallway on exterior walls had plumbing lines in them. Over time, insulation wears away. The heating, the convection heaters in those spaces had been cut, capped, and isolated years ago. So you had cold rooms at the very end of a hallway on an exterior brick wall, and the pipes within them just froze and split. And so we ran those lines inside the restrooms. We added electric heaters as a temporary solution until we can get the plant upgraded, hopefully, and under a capital renovation. But the bathrooms are back in service. The children are back in the pre-K rooms. All affected rooms are back in service at this time.
Elliot, I understand what you're saying, that the exterior walls had piping.
Yes, sir.
And now the building was built, what, in the 60s, that particular one? Was that good engineering at the time, if you know?
It was typical at the time.
All right, that's all.
But again, we have, and I want to be fair to those that came before us, right?
Right.
A lot of the times you have a steam leak or some sort of issue with the heating plant, and you have about a half an hour to get it fixed before kids come into the building. And sometimes the quick fix is cut it, cap it, isolate it, we'll deal with it later, and later never comes.
Yeah, I hear you.
So,
Okay.
it happens in these two spaces, those convection units were capped. I don't know when. I'm sure there was a leak that was the quick fix. But I'd like to see us, when we do our condition assessment, look at the entirety of the plant and look to maybe bring in some updated engineering concepts.
And not only that building, because
Right.
this district has had deferred maintenance, actually lack of maintenance for many years, unfortunately, and we're trying to get that all fixed now.
Agreed. And this is one of those very clear examples of if you put it off long enough, something else is going to happen.
Right. All right, thank you.
Elliot, I mean, because I visited both schools, I was very impressed with the professionalism of the maintenance guys that were there, contractors that were there. It wasn't a, what the hell is going on? It was a, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this. It was very well done. So my compliments to those guys.
Thank you, sir.
All right, let's see. Glasses on. Kevin, did you want to go through where we are in the budget real quick?
If I was asked to prepare a presentation for the board. So I brought that for you today. And as we proceed through the budget process, this particular presentation deals with the three, at least talking about three program aspects or aspects of three parts of the budget: administration, program, and capital. This presentation will focus on the administration aspect of it. So as you take a look at it, it'll give you a brief definition of what the three-part components are.
Did you guys send this to Paul and Chris? They have this?
No.
Now, do you want me to go scan it and email it?
Oh, it's,
Or
Or the
do you
administrative.
have it electronically?
I can't access them anything.
Okay.
PC, so.
Thank you.
Hmm.
we can keep going, I think.
So it gives you a general outline of what the administrative aspect or component is. It gives you some brief definitions of what are considered under, for example, Board of Education, central administration, finance, staff, special items, curriculum and supervision, along with a brief snapshot of where we are in the budget process for the upcoming school year. So with my understanding that we just hand this out and we'll have an opportunity to take a look at it, and if you have any questions, you can address it at another meeting.
Okay.
But it's really just a snapshot of where we are in the budget development process. And next, we'll be working on the instructional aspect and then also the capital portion of the budget. And I believe if you look at our original plan that was put out in December, those two will be addressed in the March aspect of it. And was spoken by Mr. Timms earlier today. We should plan by the end of March to have a better aspect of where our revenues are going to be from state aid and how that's going to affect our school district. So you may recall that the presentation that was done last month did address a lot of the revenue aspects of it, the state aid aspects of it, the property tax calculation, where we are, and a snapshot of our reserves. And a lot of that information was incorporated into his presentation from earlier today.
Kevin, if I look at page, because just want to make sure I understand. It says central administration on the top.
Yes.
So I see deputy superintendent for 22-23,
Yes.
168, but in 21-22 it was 0.
Yes, because there is no money budgeted in that category for those particular
Oh,
positions.
this is a budget
So,
number.
Yes.
Okay, all right, never mind.
And based on conversations with the treasurer and the auditors, it
Okay.
was their recommendation to classify it in this particular category.
I thought this was an expense, not budget,
So
sorry.
it's really, this is all budget presentation, budget preparedness for the upcoming school year.
Gotcha.
So it kind of gives you a snapshot of each particular area and the types of activities that are going on in those areas. So when people speak of administration, it's really not just people, there's other services involved. There's district insurance, there's refund of property taxes, there's BOCES administrative costs, as well as, other goods and services that are needed to support our programs.
Okay. So what we're, and hopefully you guys will get this soon, the ones online. Basically go through this. If there's anything you don't understand or you think is, you can either email Kevin, or if it's something that you think the whole board should know, we'll go back over this at the next meeting, I think.
Sure, there's some questions that we'll follow up at the next presentation.
It should be done public.
I think just because of the time issue with all the different presentations, I was actually just handing it out. today,
Yeah,
so
no, it's
Thank
good.
you.
I apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. All right. Steve.
Right, so I gave you guys all a little cheat sheet on some of the things happening at Millbrook Middle School. Some of which have already been mentioned. One thing I do want to just look at is the personalized learning that's going on here at the middle school right now. So we did just finalize our middle of the year IXL benchmark assessments. So we've been looking through that data. Our data coordinator, Mr. Miller, has done a really incredible job of creating our data wall, which gives us all the information that IXL provides us on each individual student from the fall. Everything breaks down all ELA and MAP components into different raw scores for us. Helps our teachers recognize what kind of work they can do with students in the classroom to individually really push students in a positive direction. So we're really excited about having that at our disposal. Really frames all the RTI work that we do and our multi-tiered systems of support. As a school, we've completed 15,000 skills. We are proficient in 10,000 of them, and we've mastered over 7,000 different skills. That's about 3,000 hours of direct work within the IXL program that we've been utilizing. So it's really showing the work that our students and teachers are putting into this. It's really been fantastic and a great tool for us. Again, many of the things that we've been highlighting, we had a great character education assembly that was done virtually with our home-based teachers and our students. We had our second quarter students of the quarter, and we certainly thank the PTO for sponsoring that breakfast. It's always such a wonderful thing that we get to do to start the very beginning of the third quarter. And, you know, we're working to get our spring clubs, intramurals, and athletics are all coming together. Excited to announce a new girls lacrosse intramural that's going to be coming that we saw a lot of need for. And then we had already spoken about our junior high all county students. We're really excited to be seeing. At the very bottom, I do want to draw your attention to just the various forms of communication that we have at the middle school at all times. So certainly anybody who wants to follow us on Twitter, we are MMS Blazers. Actually, there's a little bit of a typo there. It's just at MMS Blazers. And then on Instagram, we are at Blazers MMS. So you can see our kids in action, all the stuff they're doing, all the stuff they're accomplishing, what their teachers are focusing on. And then on our school webpage at all times, our monthly newsletter is available there. So basically all of the information that you're looking at that I summarized here, I'll be frank and honest that I copied and pasted it from our newsletters because that's the kind of information and the communication that we want to have with our families. Getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, a little insight into what's going to be coming out in the March newsletter. We're really excited to announce that one of our teachers, Miss Leslie Anson, was a winner and a recipient of the Presidential Education Award for Mathematics and Science, Excellence in Mathematics and Science. So to put that in perspective, only 117 people nationwide won this award, and only 2 people in all of New York State won that award, her being one of the 2. So it's a really great honor. I think it's just a testament to the work she does with her students and has over the course of the last 11 years here at Millbrook Middle School. So a little bit of what was to come. The news circles broke it a little faster than my monthly newsletter. So they beat me to the punch on that one.
All right. Any questions for Steve? Very cool.
Thank you.
All right. The athletic director going to give us an overview of spring sports.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
I didn't know exactly what you guys were looking for. But, you know, just to take a step back with the fall season, just to give you a little bit of insight on the fall season that we just had. So football, I know that you know is a topic that folks are interested in. We did end up having 6 student athletes that went over to Dover with our merge. 3 seniors, 2 juniors, and 1 sophomore that played on the varsity team at Dover and as far as I'm concerned, I thought it went really well. Gave these boys an opportunity to play tackle football for the fall season. I've developed a strong relationship with the athletic director at Dover to the extent that we're now talking about, with board approval, of course, looking to merge at the modified level as well. Because the thought process is that if we're going to build back to have our own program, we want to try to get the younger boys on the football field as well, 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. In the same vein, I've been working closely with Eric Sullivan with the Northern Duchess Raiders, Pop Warner, trying to extend to them the ability to utilize our facilities here as much as possible. They're hoping to try to get back to tackle football at the Pop Warner level as well. So I've been working with him a lot on like potentially trying to do some weeknight stuff as well, just to get the kids out on the turf more and try to drum up that interest. With Dover, the only other thing I'll add to that is that the AD did mention, because I had said to him, you know, it'd be really nice for us to be able to have a homecoming type event here or some type of game here. They're more than willing to hold at least one game here, maybe a couple games here on campus. That could serve, at least for our kids, to be able to play at home, and treat that, kind of bring back, like, we had a really successful homecoming last year, where we had soccer as the homecoming game, and then we had our homecoming dance on the football field, on the multi-purpose field on the turf. It really worked out well, so I would just be excited to be able to have a soccer game, have football, more like a homecoming weekend, back to that traditional. And with the help of Dover, we'll make that happen. Do everything that we can. We're going to try to get this going at the younger levels so that we can try to get the 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, try to generate some more interest, and then hopefully within a couple of years, we'll be able to field a varsity team. I don't see it happening this coming fall. I think we need to stick with you know, what we're doing right now, and hopefully see some change there. So alongside of that, we had a record number of boys play soccer this year. We had 23 boys on the soccer roster, and they had a nice season. It went very, very well. So, I mean, when we look at that, there were boys that probably potentially jumped over to soccer from football since we weren't able to field their team. For girls soccer as well, another, you know, season where they went to the sectional finals. We had 16 girls playing varsity soccer this year, both modified, and this is one thing I will say, the modified soccer program. So the boys program had 15 boys in it. And I don't know if you remember, but a couple of years ago, we had an issue where we weren't able to field a modified girls team because there was only like 2 or 3 girls, and we actually had those girls participate with the boys that year, which was a solution for us. We had 14 girls play modified soccer this year. So it just, you know, it was really great to see the girls modified soccer come back and, you know, build towards the future and keep that going, because that was concerning when we weren't able to field the girls team. Golf, again, working again with Millbrook. I just want to mention Millbrook Country Club, and the ability for us to be able to use that course and the generosity of them and the making us feel welcome over there. We had 8 boys play golf this fall and this past fall, and again, just can't say enough about, you know, how much we appreciate Millbrook Country Club and what they do for us. Cross country, very strong. We had upwards of 20 kids running at the varsity level, and we also had approximately 10 kids running at the modified level as well for cross country. So the fall was busy, even though we had the issues with football. Everything really went well. And then into the winter seasons, basketball, both boys and girls, varsity, JV, and modified back again. All 3 levels went very, very well. One thing I will mention that was another thing that, you know, we need to look at was the cheer. We didn't have the cheer team in the fall because we didn't have the football team, and there really actually was a limited interest in cheer in the fall as well. So over the winter, Shelley Hollingsworth, who's been with us for 20 years as the cheer coach, you know, made a really valiant attempt in the building to try to put together a cheer team for the winter season, which is their competitive cheer season. But it just wasn't in the cards. And, you know, unfortunately too, Shelley is going to be stepping down as the cheerleading coach. So she's retiring after giving us 20 years as a cheer coach. I mean, can't say enough about Shelley. She's been wonderful with the cheerleaders. Mr. Sipe and I are currently searching out replacement. Hopefully, just some new blood that can potentially, pick up the interest with that. Additionally, working with Eric Sullivan and Northern Duchess, they also have a cheer program in that youth program. We're also, we let them utilize Alden Place as a place for them to practice during the off-season months. Again, trying to work with them to generate interest at that level. So spring sports, we were unable to pull together and have lacrosse clubs again this year for the varsity level. We only had four girls sign up, 9th through 12th grade, and the boys, there was about 7 boys that signed up for lacrosse. So unfortunately, I did look at potential mergers, but there's really nobody that's near us to try to merge to get the kids that want to play lacrosse the ability to play lacrosse right now at the varsity level. I don't know what the answer is to that. I actually just had a conversation tonight with Marco Lanzoni from Spackingkill, and they're in kind of the same boat. They have a lot of, they're generating some interest for lacrosse, and he's struggling because they have all these other spring sports, and the schools our size, it's just really difficult to be able to field baseball, softball, track and field, and lacrosse. They also do crew as well at Spackingkill. So just having those conversations with him. But the one thing that I will say that's positive in the spring is, again, for the first time in a long time, we were able to field 3 teams in baseball last year. It was kind of a makeshift thing. We had barely enough to do a JV club in baseball, but this spring we will have three strong teams, varsity, JV, and modified for baseball. Softball will be fielding varsity and modified. In track and field, we have had upwards of 60 athletes, student athletes, that want to do track and field. So it's really, along with cross country, the work that Kelly Mahoney and Darren Sullivan and Brittany Hillman have done, our cross country and track and field programs have really started to take off. And this spring I petitioned Superintendent that we needed to add a 3rd coach, because we're, with that number of athletes, just to make sure that we're doing it safely. We were able to do that. We had planned to do that prior to the COVID year. When COVID canceled out the spring sports for the first time, we actually had also lined up to have a 3rd coach for the track and field season, just because they have the varsity level runners. There's probably going to be approximately 40 runners and doing events for track and field, and then another 20 students at the modified level that are going to be doing track and field events. So appreciative that we were able to add the 3rd coach, and it really helps Darren Sullivan and Brittany. And I believe Kelly Mahoney is actually going to step in and take on that role of the 3rd coach. So that's about all I have. I'm glad that I was able to come in, because I know it's been a while that we've had these conversations, and the last time I think I was here was during the last spring when we had the football, trying to get, figure out our football situation with the merge. But I'm certainly welcome to answer any questions that folks have. It's been busy. It's been, difficult, just like everybody else coming out of COVID. It's been a real challenge, but I think we're heading in a pretty good direction, and it's just kind of boots on the ground and trying to make things work as best we can at this point to start to build back to where we were prior to COVID.
Any questions? Questions, Paul?
No, just, Al, it's good to hear from you. And like you, I do some of the same work down where I am. I think a lot of times that people don't understand the game within the game and what really goes on behind the scenes. Like, all of us as administrators would like to say we'd like to run every sport for every kid, but it just doesn't always work out like that. And I want to thank you for being, I guess, thorough and, explaining things. I would just think the earlier we can put things out, the earlier people can get answers, the more transparent we can be. I think that puts people at ease. You know what I mean? But I thank you for tonight. Good luck with the cheerleading coach. That's going to be tough to replace. That's hard to find a good cheerleading coach. So a lot of different challenges. And the lacrosse, if we're gonna make that a club, I think it's great to get it started. So thanks for that. But I do know that there's a lot of other behind the scene things that go on that the regular person does not understand, even your time commitment. It's not about just going to games. It's going to the AD meetings, it's getting on Sports U, it's scheduling, it's buses, it's everything else that goes with it. So I know I talked to you offline a lot, but thank you very much. And thanks for at least getting this other lacrosse piece, hopefully off the ground. And it's funny, sometimes you got to be careful for what you wish for, because in starting these other programs, then you're competing against in a small school, your other spring sports. But I think lacrosse is a growing program with a lot of kids interested, especially at the lower level. And if we can get something going with that, I think it'll be awesome. So thank you. And thanks for letting us be aware of it tonight. Thanks for communicating.
I appreciate that. And the goal obviously would be if we see a pocket of student athletes at the modified level, it's hard to run lacrosse at the modified level, because you're only drawing from two grade levels. But the overarching goal, and when you see that, and the idea of the club is to promote this so that when those student athletes that have that pocket of players that want to play lacrosse get to the high school, we can then jump on that and move towards having the varsity team. But thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for being proactive and taking the extra steps. And I do appreciate you coming in and spending your evening with us, but it's good to hear from you face to face.
Yeah, that's one thing with the AD job. It's a very enjoyable job, but it's long days, it's busy days that go quickly. But I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and just trying to do the best that I can. And sometimes, like Paul says, underappreciated or not really understood. But folks should know that I've been involved in sports my whole entire life, and I'm a huge advocate for sports. And I want to do everything that I can for the kids in this district. So that's what I do every day, and it's enjoyable. It really is. So I really appreciate the opportunity to do this for the district.
Oh, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, Al. All right, where are we? Financials and warrants. No. No, you guys can split.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
All right,
Thank you,
so
Al.
much.
All right.
Good evening, everybody.
Bye,
See ya.
thank you. Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, financials and warrants. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All right. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any against? All right. Accept the MEF donation. 260. Let me see. Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Oh, we'll let Chris do that. Do I have a second? Yeah. All right. Any other than, once again, thank you to the MEF for always supporting us. Is any other comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. Any against? Next, to accept the letter of Jim Outwater, sorry, resigning for purpose of retirement. Do I have a motion to accept? Do I have a second?
Second.
Any comments, questions? Thank you, Jim, for all your years.
Glad to see him go. He's been a fixture here for a long time.
I don't know how long he's been here. Been here a while. I thought I was going to give his wife a break, make him keep working. He snuck out at the very next meeting. Was that?
Maybe if she's listening.
That's right. So yeah, I tried. Okay. All in favor? All right. Any against? All right. We have the first reading of 2342. this was the one that we pulled last time because of,
I didn't have both of the copies attached, so.
okay. So do we have a motion to, oh no, we don't need a
we don't
motion.
need a motion, that's just the
All right, anyway, that's the first reading. Do we have any questions from the public?
We do not.
All right. We have, I think, facilities, do we have anything from the facilities committee, Chris, or Jen, or anybody? Whoever.
No, not at this point. We have, Elliot, do we have another one on the next meeting schedule?
We haven't scheduled a meeting since the interviews. But
Right.
those now, we have the contract
Right.
submitted to the clerk already for board resolution of the next meeting, so we're ready to rock and roll.
Cool. All right, district safety committee, I don't see.
So we, the district safety committee met on the 9th. We had updated conversations about some technology that needed to be reworked with our phone system. For some reason, our addresses were not coming through to 911 accurately. Everything was being routed through the middle school. So the interim fix of that was making sure that we had labels on all the phones with the actual physical address. But then we checked with BOCES. They actually just recently tested and that's all been fixed. So that was one thing. We also worked with PNW BOCES to create our reunification bag. So in the event of an emergency where we're unable to dismiss typically, it's literally the process of getting students back in touch with their caregivers. And that could be for a multitude of reasons. It could be something if there was like an accident blocking the roadway and we had to dismiss from another location or something like that. There's many reasons why we might use this. So all of our kits are being updated and prepared by PNW BOCES. All of the reunification maps have been updated. Elliot, myself, and Frank from PNW did that on one of the snow days that we were here. And then we actually, when the weather gets nicer, we are actually going to run through a reunification, but not in our own building. So like high school folks will run a reunification for the middle school, let's say, because if there is ever an incident that the middle school staff is attending to the middle school students, we're going to need other people to be coordinating that activity. So it'll help them get familiar with the building. It'll help them to not rely on what they know, but actually rely on the information in the computer, the way that it's supposed to be done, very procedurally. So we will be walking through those exercises as safety teams in each of our buildings in the spring.
Very good. Okay. Tech committee? Elliot?
Yep, the tech committee met last week and we went through the digital fluency and computer science learning standards for grades 7 and 8. So that's been an ongoing process. We've worked all the way from kindergarten up through middle school. Next couple meetings this year, we're going to focus on the last grade bands, which is the 9-12 group. We're going to be sharing the draft that we're submitting to the state for our next 3-year technology plan. That's going to look a lot like what we presented to the board last June, just updated, shifting it 1 year forward, because that was more of an informal internal document, and we're going to just dress it up for the state submission. So that was it.
Ellie, can you share how your colleagues felt about the work that we're doing?
Yeah, we've had some incidental conversations with other districts in the region, and I want to say there was probably 5 neighboring districts that are going to copy our process with trying to align the computer science and digital fluency learning standards with the curriculum maps and just the instructional program goals of the district. So we're a bit of ahead of the curve on that. And that's something to be proud of. And can't thank our committee enough. We've got every principal in the district involved, every administrator, a handful of teachers and support staff that are just really contributing to that work. And hopefully it's going to inform our practices going forward.
Very good. All right, enrollment report is there for your whatever. MEF report, anything, Chris?
Laura did a lot of the work for my
I feel like I don't really need to announce anything today because Laura sent out the annual appeal to all the parents as well as our MEF. We've decided to do the Taste to Go again this year rather than the traditional Taste of Millbrook. We, really heavily debated and put a lot of thinking into it and reach out to the restaurants in the community. And a lot of the restaurants just they're not ready. They're not, they're not staffed. They're hurting. So we're gonna do this Taste to Go again. And we're just thinking of ways to vamp it up. It will be a different Taste to Go. So more to come about that, but June 4th. And thank you, Laura, for sending that out.
Sure, I'll send out reminders too.
Yeah, great.
Very good. PTO report.
Nothing new. They had, I think, their last 2 meetings canceled due to good weather, whatever. So the only thing that they had was the Gertrude Chocolate fundraiser, which ended today, I think. So hopefully the second meeting in March, we'll have more updates on springtime events and stuff.
Suspension incident report is there for your reading. Anyone have anything that they would like to get on for future agenda? On future agendas, there's a list of about 10 things that we have going right now. But if there's something else, and you don't have to wait for the meeting to do this, you can always just let me know. With that, I think, I hate to say it, but I think.
No, Perry, don't do this. I'm on vacation this week. I can stay on up till 12. Please, come on.
All right, well,
Zip it.
I was gonna take a short break and then go into the second half of the meeting. But if you want to go straight through, do I have a motion to adjourn? Do I have a second?
Perry, can I ask a quick question on the retreat? 7 o'clock start or 6 o'clock?
6,
6, in person or Zoom?
here, in person.
Okay.
Right?
What is Cheryl cooking again?
She's cooking Brajol and Yankee, I think.
Who's my second on the adjournment?
David. All in favor? Aye. Any against? All right, folks. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night.
Good night, Chris.
Good night,
Good night,
Chris.
Paul.
Hi, Chris. Bye, Paul.
Good night, all. Good night. Good night, guys.
Good night. Yeah.